Welcome to Geocache Adventures with me, Shadow Dragon 1, where I explore the world of geocaching. If you like the podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or the Geocache Adventures Facebook page. Or share it with somebody that you think would enjoy it. Word of mouth is a great way to spread the podcast. You can also join Geocache Adventures on Buy Me a Coffee. Just follow Geo Adventures, that's one word, GEO Adventures on Buy Me a Coffee, and get behind the scenes on every episode or become a member to unlock other exclusive content. Hi everybody, Amy Shadow Dragon 1 here, and with me today is fellow cacher Jay Kennedy, aka LANMonkey, aka YouTube vlogger, author, and co-host of Caching in the Northwest. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
So to start off, I always love to hear, how did you start geocaching?
How did we start geocaching? I'm a lifelong hiker, backpacker, outdoors enthusiast, as is Mrs. LANMonkey. And back around 2012, we finally decided that it would be wise if we had a GPSR when we're out in the outback of British Columbia, hiking in the mountains. And when we purchased it, there's we purchased a Garmin, and there's a little note in there from geocaching.com, and a friend of ours had tried out the game as well and told us more about it and encouraged us to give it a try. We went out with her and tried it once or twice, and we're kind of instantly hooked. So we really haven't looked back.
So if you're an avid hiker, I'm going to guess that somehow plays into the LANMonkey name there.
Well, yeah. Well, it throws people off a little bit because there's no D in the name at all. It's LAN monkey, and it's actually an old work nickname from one of my original jobs when I first started out of post-secondary working. I was the local area network monkey. I was the guy who was climbing up ladders and pulling cables through the ceilings. So
okay, I get you now.
So when we started the game, it's like, oh, you have to have a nickname. I don't know. This is what people called me at work. Sure, let's try that. So
there you go. That works. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it did throw me off because the entire time I swear they had been saying land with a D. It just goes to show you hear what it's like seeing things. Your brain just kind of triggers towards what you're familiar with. And
it's like song lyrics. Yeah.
Yes.
You just hear the words you want to hear.
Well, we're going to talk about EarthCaches today. And
great. I love EarthCaches.
I am so glad you're excited about this because I have had trouble finding somebody to come on here and talk about EarthCaches with me. So I'm excited about this too.
Oh, what is wrong with people, Amy?
I don't know.
It's the best kind of cache.
Well, let's start the very basics. What is an EarthCache?
Absolutely. So an EarthCache, the simplest way to explain it is that it is a type of virtual cache. So there's no physical container. So assuming your listeners are familiar with the game itself, and generally you would be out there looking for a hidden container of some sort. Well, there's no physical container at all. So much like a virtual cache. The difference is that the intent of an EarthCache is to actually teach a simple geology or earth science lesson. So there will, in the description of the EarthCache, be as I said, a simple, very clear, well-written lesson in geology or earth science that is to be learned. Observations are to be made at the location that you're given. And then some questions are posed based on those observations and based on the lessons. You submit the answers, and that allows you to claim your find. And that's kind of in a nutshell. It's read, observe, answer, then log is how I always like to sum up an EarthCache.
That's great. Now you said a keyword there, simple lesson. And I've got to tell you, I have seen a few EarthCaches that I feel like I need a master's in geology to even try to attempt doing. They seem so complex sometimes.
I think we'll get into that when we talk about how to create EarthCaches, but you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that puts people off earth caches. And I get that for sure. Mrs. LANMonkey says, hey, if I feel like I have to go back to school, then I'm going to pass. I'm going to go do something else. You can do this. Now that said, she solved some very complex puzzles that I'm like, nah, I'm not putting time into that. So it's a great partnership. But you're right. The intent is that it is supposed to teach people. It is supposed to be approachable. It's not supposed to put you off and have you look at it and go, oh my gosh, I just don't even want to go near this thing. So, like anything in the game, there's varying levels.
Well put. Yes, well put. So how did these caches get started?
Wow, great question. EarthCaches, as I understand it, and I've been doing a little bit of research on this recently for a project I'm working on, but they started as a partnership in some discussions between Geocaching HQ, the U.S. National Parks, and the Geological Society of America. They held some meetings, and the reason they were having those meetings is because they wanted to find ways for people to geocache responsibly in the national parks. And there was concern from the national parks of, we don't necessarily want people going in and tearing up trees and poking around in geysers and what have you. Choose your national park of preference. They wanted people to be safe, and they also wanted to preserve the national park experience for everyone else. So, so they collaboratively came up with this idea, kind of playing off of the virtual cache concept, came up with the EarthCaches, and they were quite successful. The very first one was placed in New South Wales, Australia. Surprisingly, you would think, oh, it would be somewhere in the US, since those are the people who were coming up with it. But the very first one, GC Hotel Foxtrot Tango 2. Well, that's a lot of dances in that.
That is a lot of dances.
That's the very first one, and that one is it's called EarthCache 1, appropriately. It's a walkabout geology tour in Wasp Head, and it was placed by GeoAware, the very first EarthCache reviewer.
Now, it is really interesting that, as you said, it was the Geological Society of America that got behind this, but the very first one is placed in Australia.
There's an interesting story behind that, and I can't remember the details, so I'm not going to try and retell it. But
okay,
I believe if you do some research online, your listeners they'll probably come across the story behind that one. There's some great people from the GSA who've done a lot of public speaking in various venues and a lot of writing for earth caching. So there's lots of information out there to find.
So we've talked a bit about finding earth caches.
Yes.
How do you create an earth cache, though? This seems a lot harder than just your traditional geocache, sticking it on a guardrail under a lamppost. There's a bit more to it than that. So can you tell us about that process?
Yeah. You hire a geologist, and
that's where I went wrong.
No. Well, and again, right, this goes back to your comment earlier about the accessibility of the, and not just the physical accessibility, but just the mental accessibility of earth caches. And they really are intended to be approachable and something that anyone can do. The advice that is commonly given is that they should be written at a grade 9 writing and learning level. Now, that's not necessarily intuitive to everybody. Like, okay, well, what's a grade 9 level? It's been probably for a few of us a few years since we were in grade 9.
Just a couple.
Maybe some folks are lucky and they've got kids who are closer to grade 9, so they can make an approximation. But the idea is, if you're using technical terminology, define it. Define it early on. Explain what you're talking about, and write it in a manner so that if somebody didn't have that experience, if somebody hadn't picked up that particular textbook that you're getting this information from, or the website you're getting this information from, that it is understandable for them, so that they'll enjoy the experience. And it's really about an enjoyable learning experience. So some of the advice I've been given when I've talked to some of the GeoAwares GeoAwares is what they call the reviewers for EarthCaches. So EarthCaches have their own unique reviewer type called GeoAwares. And some of the advice I've been given from them is to really try and keep it to one lesson in the EarthCache. Don't try and combine a whole lot of things, because people are just going to get lost, right? Just keep it clear and keep it simple. And then it's going to be easier to write for you as well, right? If you're not trying to, explain, well, this waterfall is here because of the erosion that created it, but these mountains were formed by this tectonic movement. And then, oh, by the way, did you know how the earth was formed? And so it's like, oh, whoa, slow down. So, so you focus on one thing. Like I said, try and write it at a grade 9 writing and learning level. And it has to have, so it has to have an explanation of the science that you're bringing somebody there to see. Whatever it is that you're trying to explain has to be observable at the location you provide. And, keep the tasks. You need to have some tasks for people to do so that there's questions that they can answer. Keep them clear, simple, and geology related. And that's one of the things that I've also heard from GeoAwares is they understand the desire to have a prove you were here question, but they would like, and they'll be more apt to approve your EarthCache if the prove you were here question is related to the geology or science lesson that's being provided. So, something unique about that location that's related to the lesson, as opposed to how many legs are on the bench on the far corner of the park, right? Like, don't use that as a prove you were here question. And I get why an EarthCache owner would want people to not armchair the EarthCaches. They want them to have the experience. They want them to learn. They want them to share the information accurately. But that's just one of the things that will help you get your EarthCache reviewed and approved.
Now, these EarthCache reviewers, they are they partnered with, or do they actually, trying to think of the right word here, are they members of the Geological Society or partnered with them in some way to do these reviews?
That's a great question. Many of them are, but they do not have to be. So they are, usually, I believe the process is they are recommended by an existing GeoAware, an existing EarthCache reviewer. So they'll be familiar with who seems to be passionate enough about the topic and knowledgeable enough about the earth caching topics, geology and earth sciences, to be a suitable new GeoAware. So they don't come up too often. I think there's probably new Geocache reviewers more often than there are new GeoAwares. But every once in a while, there'll be a new one. But I believe, I'm sorry, there does not need to be a direct association or membership with the GSA in order to be a GeoAware.
Okay. So one thing that I struggle with when it comes to EarthCaches is having my son with me. He's in 3rd grade right now. So even if you do hit a 9th grade reading level, it's kind of above. He's smart, but he's not Einstein. Yeah, he's like most 3rd graders. He loses attention really quick, and these EarthCaches can be really hard to do. Do you have any tips, or have you heard of any tips for trying to get kids a bit more interested? Because I can point out a fossil and he thinks that's neat, but then trying to actually
dinosaurs,
do the EarthCache.
Right?
Yes,
cool.
Dinosaurs are awesome. What's a plate tectonic is a whole different kettle of fish.
It is. And that's a great question. And the answer is, of course, going to be, it depends. There's going to be some EarthCaches that either the location or the topic of the EarthCache it's just not going to be relevant for a kid. So like any geocache, and more so with EarthCaches, it's about do a skim read of the description before you take on the adventure, particularly if you're taking a young kid with you, or multiple young kids with you, or adults who have a short attention span. And read through it and say, okay, look, is is this going to take us somewhere interesting? So even if they're not interested in the lesson, is it going to be a really cool location? So, maybe it's going to be to a waterfall or a hanging canyon where maybe the lesson itself is of no interest to them, but the location will be interesting. So they'll be busy skipping rocks and looking around and playing while you're making your observations and doing this. So it can work out that way if you think about where are you going, is this area, but also is it going to be safe for little kids? So again, read through it, check the terrain rating and the difficulty ratings, but mostly I would say read through the description and have an idea of where it is you're going, and you'll have to make the assessment of are they going to be interested in the topic? And you're right, often children under a certain age are not going to be interested in the geology topic unless there's fossils to find. And many earth caches have that, and those are one of my favorite types for sure. Or is it going to be at a location where at least they'll be entertained and they'll find it interesting just to be there? They don't care about the geology, but they're going to have a good time.
That's some great advice. On these earth caches, is there a minimum question requirement?
In what sense?
So when you're writing your lesson and writing up your questions, I have seen anywhere from 3 to 6 questions for an earth cache. Is there a minimum requirement for getting it approved that you have to have at least 2 questions, or is a single question acceptable?
Yeah, I'm going to give my favorite answer. It depends. So
It depends.
there isn't a minimum or maximum number of questions. I think in the sense of maximum, you probably don't want to overdo it because, unless you're really amping up the difficulty level. I have one earth cache that I own where I have asked multiple questions and there's a bit of homework, but I've amped up the difficulty level. So it's intended to be, hey, some people want to hire DT on their earth cache. Well, here's how I make that possible and still make it realistic. So yeah, it's a higher difficulty rating. So if you want it, you got to do a little more work, but there isn't a minimum. I think, again, the advice that I've been given by the geo-awares in the conversations I've had with them is that really just as long as the questions pertain to the lesson, and you're able to answer the questions based on the observations you can make at ground zero. So you could be one question if you'd like, and it's just you're making an observation about something. So there's, you're going to a site. There's, so let's take the fossil example. And so you go to a site and there's a fossil bed, and you are explaining how these fossils came to be. And the question, is to have somebody examine the rock, because maybe they might not be able to actually find a fossil. Sometimes that's the case, but have them examine, feel the touch, the feel of the rock, how grainy is it, etc. And then just ask a question about describe the rock at this site. And then you can kind of have, I guess, maybe a second question of why is this the kind of rock where a fossil would be found? And, it's fairly simple if you have it explained in the lesson. But then, yes, it'll prove that they were there because they're going to describe what they saw and it should match. But yeah, I would say as long as the questions are relevant to what you're doing and stay within the difficulty rating that you're trying to achieve with the EarthCache.
Okay. One of the fun things about finding and hiding these, besides getting to see different neat geologies, is there's EarthCache achievements that you can complete and get little icons for your geocaching page.
Yes.
So what can you tell us about these?
All right. Well, there's various different ones like anything else in the game, but the primary ones, and probably the ones you're thinking of, and you see them often when people publish their earth caches or on people's profiles, are the ones that are actually granted through the Geological Society of America. Those are the EarthCache Masters and the EarthCache Discover series of badges, digital badges that you can earn. The EarthCache Masters are actually a combination of not only finding or visiting an Earth cache and answering the questions correctly and logging them. But also you have to create a certain number of Earth caches in order to earn the Earth Cache Master. So it's a little more involved. I think it's a great program, a great system. And so once you've met the requirements, and all the information is actually on the Geological Society of America website, so you can find all this information there about the Masters and Discover programs. But once you feel you qualify, you just submit an online form, and they'll go and check your geocaching.com profile. So don't have your profile hidden, because then you can't see. But they'll check your profile and say, "Yep, you qualify," and then they'll grant you a link to put those on. So that's the Masters program, and the other is the Discover, where it's really just based on how numbers of Earth caches you have found.
Okay.
So those are the ones, the official Geological Society of America ones, the prestigious ones, I guess you'd say. But also through good old Project GC, the badge gen function does have an Earth Cacher badge that you can earn with add-ons to it, including the overall. It's based on the overall number of Earth cache finds, but it has add-ons for FTFs on Earth caches, finding one on leap day, completing your 81 matrix, your DT matrix. That's very rare to achieve. I know of a couple of people who've done that, and that's quite the achievement.
So that's the DT matrix completely out of Earth caches.
Earth caches, yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty hardcore.
That is a hardcore Earth cacher right there. That's impressive.
Yeah. Well, and there's, as I think everybody knows, there's also geocaching.com souvenir. Every year, there's 2 days a year, you can earn the International EarthCache Weekend souvenir, which is a great one to add to your collection. And then, there's various challenge caches out there as well. So it's not, a challenge cache doesn't necessarily get you a digital souvenir, but let's see, a log a challenge cache, and some of those are on quantities of Earth caches found. Some are on locations where you've found them, countries, counties, states, continents, etc. Some are on completing either the total or a subset of the DT matrix. Some are on finding the oldest Earth caches in different locations. There's lots of different challenges out there for Earth caching.
That's pretty neat. When I personally tend to think of challenges and FizzieGrid, I don't necessarily just jump straight to Earth caches.
Not many people do, but like I said, I know of a handful of people who've made that their goal, and good for them. That's pretty impressive.
That's pretty neat. There's a couple in my area, and I've done them, but there's not a lot in my particular area. I do know if people are looking for them, they can, of course, go to geocaching.com and search by type.
Right.
But if you're trying to find a place that would make a good Earth cache, obviously you need a lesson, a geology lesson.
Yeah.
Hopefully something interesting. But what is a good... trying to think of how to word this here. Do you have any advice for somebody wanting to place an Earth cache?
Yeah, I get asked that question quite often, even in the local Earth caching community here. Folks who want to place an Earth cache, but they're just, I don't know. And I get it, right? If you're not really, I'm very passionate about earth sciences and geology, and it's not my career, but it's something that I've taken on as a hobby, and I've always been interested in. So I have quite a collection of books and taken some education on, etc. So I have a bit of a background there. So I can look at things and go, okay, I can see what the geology lesson here is, but I get that not everybody can. So there's, I've actually previously did a little mini podcast series, 5 episodes. It's also available on YouTube or to download and stream, called This is Planet Earth, where we actually talk through a number of those things. a little bit of I'll give you a little bit of a scoop. I'm writing a book on how to earth cache. So when that comes out, that will also include a lot of this kind of information as well. But one of the things I would say is to just be aware of what you're looking at. So it can be anything from water reservoirs, and so hydrology is an area of earth sciences. You can look at what are they doing with the groundwater in my community? Like, do they have retention ponds and daylighted streams and things like that? And people are like, I don't even know what words he's using, but Google them. Google those words and then understand what it is, and then look in your area. And you'd be surprised where you live, how many different options there are of different things. A lot of communities have some sort of mining history in the community. Well, read up a little bit on the mining history of your community. You'll find, oh, well, you know what? Geez, there was a coal mine over on this side of the community. I'm trying to be abstract about this, but and not that you need to send people into the coal mine, but you can explain, oh, well, there's a coal mine here because of these things. So you will have to do a little bit of research, but just kind of, it's about being aware of what, and this is really the intent of EarthCaches, I believe, between HQ and the GSA as well. But it's about being aware of the planet that we're living on and that we're playing this game in and on, and using your senses and doing a little bit of research, and you'd be amazed what you can find out with just a little bit of Googling. And there's some great books as well. So, obviously I'm up in, well, I shouldn't say obviously, maybe people don't know, but I'm up in Southwest British Columbia, and there's a number of great books that have been published up here about the geology of the area. And so I have a number of those books, and I can read through them and go, oh, well, that's cool. I didn't realize that, this was here. And then it's an opportunity to take somebody to a location and walk them through the geology of that location in grade 9 comprehension levels. Did that answer your question?
It did. That really helped a lot. It gave me a lot to think about as well. And I'm thinking a trip to my local library to check up some of the local area history is in order sometime soon.
There you go. I would be delighted to hear about an EarthCache that you decide to eventually put out.
Well, I have actually been wanting to try to do that, but I have been completely stumped as to where to even start trying to find a spot to place one. So that gives me a start to try to find one to place one. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
So let's talk a little bit more about the EarthCache weekend. How did that get started? What exactly is that all about?
So I might be confusing people because in my usual style, I just insist on calling things not exactly what HQ calls them because I find it very entertaining to do that. It is called International EarthCache Day.
It is called day, but it's over a weekend.
But so it's over a weekend,
drives me nuts. It really
I call it EarthCache weekend. It used to be a single day, and that day is an annual day where Geocaching HQ, which it also happens to be Canadian Thanksgiving quite often on the same day, and it celebrates the anniversary of the first EarthCache that was placed, the one we talked about earlier in Australia. And so the idea is, originally it was one day, and then they expanded it to 2 days to make it a little easier for folks to be able to find an EarthCache. Because as you said, there's not a lot of EarthCaches necessarily in your area unless you happen to. I'm lucky. I live in an area where there's a lot of people who are passionate about EarthCaching, so there's a lot of EarthCaches, which is great. But not everybody has that opportunity. I definitely know that. And so they give you 2 days so that if you need to travel a bit to find one, you have that option. But so International EarthCache Day / weekend,
yes,
it celebrates the anniversary of the first EarthCache placed, and you earn a unique souvenir each year. It's a different souvenir each year for finding an EarthCache on one of those 2 days. HQ and the GSA collaborated to recognize this. It's in order to promote that unique cache type. It also promotes an increased awareness of the ideas behind why that cache type exists. So having geocachers more aware and informed about our planet, and more aware and informed about, much like CETOs, about what's important and what's fragile about our planet. So it's a great initiative, and maybe folks might even remember a couple of years ago now. Gosh, I can't remember how long ago. It might have been in the before times, but they had an initiative associated with NASA and the Mars missions called the Planetary Geology. What do they
Yes.
call that? Yeah. So that was to help us even understand that, a lot of these earth science lessons, these earth caching lessons that we're learning, they're actually applicable on other planets and on the moon. So I thought that was a neat angle that they took with that.
I agree. It's definitely a different twist to bring light to these unique geocaches in a way that I doubt most people are thinking the moon or Mars when you're talking about geology, unless you're actually talking about space geology, which is a whole different level. So that is a really neat way that they did to partner up and do something different with that.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So I've got to ask, you've teased us a bit about this book that's coming out. Can we get a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, it's under a working title at the moment. So I'm working. The working title is "Earth Caches Are Easy," um, and
I like it.
the
I
full
like it.
disclosure, they're not, but the book is intended to help make them accessible. So it lays out the concept of what Earth caches are, and how to how to go about both finding them and creating them. And it also contains a section giving some basics of geology. It's not a textbook. It's not a heavy read. It's very approachable, but I was inspired to write it by a program that the GSA used to have, but they've now retired. That was called EarthCache Academy. And it was an online learning program that people could do. It's not available anymore, unfortunately, but that was specifically about Earth caches, but would actually walk you through a series of lessons around Earth caching, or sorry, around geology, and give you a very strong basic understanding of the premises and the principles that form a healthy geological understanding. So it was a fantastic program. You could earn certificates of achievement by completing the different courses, et cetera. But I think they ran out of funding for it, and they couldn't achieve enough funding. That's now I'm making an assumption here. I don't know that for sure, but that's my understanding. And so they weren't able to sustain the program. But I want to fill that void with my book. So that's really what I'm trying to target.
Well, it sounds awesome. Do you have an anticipated launch of your published date that you're hoping to hit?
Oh my gosh. I wish I could do this stuff full time, Amy, so that
Oh, I get that.
I could just, sit down and focus on it. It's been a work in progress for a year and a half now.
Okay.
I actually have been working with some GeoWares, gathering information. I've actually been in contact with some folks at HQ as well, making sure that what I'm doing, I'm doing it right. Um, I'm hoping that it is going to release in 2023. I just don't, I'm not far
It's
enough
hard to
along to
pin
commit to a
down.
date yet.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. I look forward to seeing that book come out, and hopefully, you know what, it would be awesome if it came out just in time for International Earth Care or Earth Cache. I can't talk. My gosh. International Earth Cache Day weekend this
Oh,
year.
I really hope I have it done well before October. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. This has been very informative on Earth caches.
Awesome.
So for cache highlights,
Yes.
you came with two, which is awesome because I don't think I've ever had an Earth cache highlighted before
Ooh.
that I can think of. So having two is even better. So let's start with the first one. Let's start with your hide, GC7V6GC, and that was called Fraser River Plume. Is that correct?
The Fraser River Plume, yes.
Okay. What is this?
So the Fraser River is the main huge river that empties out the part of British Columbia where I live into the Salish Sea. And it has quite a large amount of sediment that it moves out, and that creates a really interesting, unique phenomena that you can observe. But you can only really observe it either from way up in the air in a plane, and I've had a number of people who've actually logged it and successfully logged it from a plane, or more often, people will log it from a BC ferry, which crosses the Fraser River Plume line on the Nanaimo route, and sometimes on the Victoria route, but definitely usually on the Nanaimo route. And
Okay.
so it's a terrain 5 because you need to have a boat or a plane to to log it.
Seems like a fair
And
rating.
yeah, and so it has a kind of an interesting, I think, an interesting description, and you need to read through it and understand it. And what I ask people to do in there is so of course, like every Earth cache, same as a virtual, I have questions. I want you to just email me the answers. Please don't, post those answers with your log. But then I do have some things. I ask people post a picture of the plume line as you cross it, and I've seen some remarkable pictures. The color distinction is so vivid, particularly in the summer of when people cross it, that it's just amazing to see some people's photos. And then I also ask people in your log, send or include the coordinates you were at when you crossed it, because it moves. It's not always in the same spot. So I've
Oh.
put it at sort of an average location, and I tell people, like, you're going to have to watch for this on your ferry ride or on your boat ride, because you'll know it when you see it, but you won't necessarily hit it at these coordinates, but you got to put it somewhere, right? So people have a lot of fun with it. And what's really neat is that I can collect all the coordinates in the logs, and I can plot. I've got a spreadsheet where I'm kind of plotting, where does it move to? So where are different people
Oh.
crossing the plume? So it's
Oh, that's
really neat.
neat.
I can see at different times of year where the edge of the plume is. So it's a lot of fun that way.
Oh, that's neat. So you've got a graph in Excel that's showing that.
Yeah, I
That's
mean
awesome.
the graph, it's not really graphed because it's coordinates. So what I do is I just have a spreadsheet of them, but then I plot the coordinates on a
Plot the
map,
yeah.
and that allows me to see where those would be.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. So I'm guessing, of course, as you said, the time of the year is going to make a difference. But if I had to guess, I would say each season for each year, you're going to have typically probably somewhere around the same variation of change.
You would think so, but it's been really interesting because it doesn't always, because there's a lot of other factors that come into play. Now, I don't want to give away the answers to the Earth cache, but you would think it would be like, oh, in the spring it'll be here, in the fall it'll be there, in the summer it'll be here, but it doesn't exactly work that way. It's quite fascinating.
Oh,
It's a lot of factors at play.
that's really neat. Very cool. How did you come across that location to put? Did you just happen to be on the ferry and go, "Oh, hey, look at that"?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where it started. And what's kind of funny is we had Mrs. Monkey and I, we take the ferry. We've been taking the ferry for years and years and years, basically our whole lives, going back and forth to Vancouver Island and the mainland. And we had seen this before, and we thought, well, that's really cool. What is that? So we had done some research, and like, oh, that's what that is. And then it was once we started playing geocache, it was like, that would make a really good Earth cache. I'm like, oh, how would we do that? So then took some time, do a little more research, like, okay, what would you ask questions about? How would you make this an Earth cache? I actually consulted with one of the GeoWares that I know and said, can I do this? Can I do that? And got some feedback, which was really helpful. By the way, that's another thing. GeoAwares are very happy to answer questions and help provide you a little direction. If you've got an idea and you want to say, can I make an Earth cache on this topic? And they'll be able to give you a little more direction. So that's another good tip.
Okay.
But yeah, so we had observed it for, and I can't remember how many more trips back and forth it was, like okay, take a measurement here, I'll take, and then we're noticing, wow, this really moves. So that's when we decided, okay, we're going to kind of average out where we put the coordinates, and we'll tell people, you gotta watch for this. So yeah, it
That's
was quite a
neat.
process to put it together. A lot of interesting learning. All the science behind that particular Earth cache is very accessible. It's not a really complicated topic, but it's really interesting.
That's really cool. So for the second cache highlight, this is one that you found,
Yes.
and it's GC2Q4WB, and it's Devil's Bath cenotes.
Cenote. Yes.
Cenote. Okay, it's close.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, yeah. Gosh, I found over 700 Earth caches, so it was really hard to pick one because I love most of them, and so many of them are on unique topics. We found Earth caches on, waterfalls and caves and mines and fossil beds and beaches and shorelines and volcanoes and landslides and glaciers. There's so many fascinating things, but cenotes are a rather unique and interesting piece of geology for folks who've spent some time in the Caribbean, or Florida has some cenotes. Cuba has quite a number. But a lot of the Caribbean islands, Mexico has a lot of cenotes as well. So they may be familiar with what this is, but it's basically a bowl-shaped hole, usually filled with water, in the earth. But it's quite often very even, very regular in shape. And the one that I chose, the Devil's Bath, is just a really unique location. So, like I said, normally they're in tropical areas, is where people are accustomed to seeing them because of the large percentage of limestone that needs to be there to make the successful
Okay.
formation of a cenote. But Upper Vancouver Island has a large exposed area of limestone, and so not a lot of people know this, but in Upper Vancouver Island, quite out in the wild, this one's quite near a community called Port Alice. There is what they call karst geology, which is the limestone-based geology that allows the formation of these things. And
Oh.
I included a link for you as well for a short YouTube video I filmed with drone footage of that cenote. It's quite remarkable to see it, and it's huge. So when you go there, there's an observation platform. You can go up and make your observations and take a look, and it's a spectacular thing to see. And then it's really interesting to understand how it was formed. And then I found it quite fascinating to say, wow, something that I had seen when I was in Cuba and Florida and in the Caribbean and Mexico, and now I'm seeing it way up north here in Canada. Like, wow, I was not expecting that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. And I will definitely link to that video in the show notes for anybody that wants to check it out, because it is a neat video.
Thank you.
This stuff, the geology, a lot of times we just think of it fossils, earthquakes, and stuff, but there's really so much more to it, as you've mentioned earlier. And it gets to be really fascinating when you start to realize that, oh, like the cenote, it's only, it's typically, you're supposed to find this in the tropic. Oh, wait a minute, there's one in Canada. That Canada does not scream tropics. So
Nope.
it's interesting how the earth can throw a curveball at us in a scientific form and go, yeah, I'm just gonna plop one of these here today. And
Exactly. Yeah, it often does. That's part of the fun of Earth caches.
that's very cool. Is there anything else about earth caches that you want to share with us? I think that we should know about. I mean, you've had so many adventures with earth caches. You're working on this book. I can imagine you have volumes to say about them.
I do. Well, I mentioned the mini podcast that I had done with a friend, Keats 94. He and I had worked together on that project. And it's a great, 5 short, well, I guess the videos aren't that short. They're like, half an hour long, but it really gives you a really great understanding of the topic. So that's something I would suggest people can check out. But I think generally what I would say is try them and take the time to read through the descriptions and find some that are accessible for you. So, if the first couple that you look at, you're like, I don't even know what these guys are talking about. Fair enough, right? Like, as I said off the start, not all geocaches are created equal.
Yeah.
So you may find some that are like, oh, that's not really written for me. Like, and quite likely there's a bunch that aren't. But if you just keep your eyes open on them and just keep looking, particularly when you travel, if folks are going to get out into a different community or a different state or province or even a different country, just keep your eyes open. Often there'll be earth caches that are written about a statue, because they're made out of stone. And so you can go, okay, well, I'm going to go to this statue because I'm going to be in this town center, and fine, I'll take a read through it. And again, maybe you'll read through and go, I'm lost. I don't even know what they're getting at. But maybe you'll find one where it's like, oh, this base is made out of limestone, and this is where it was mined, and they just want me to, touch it and describe what I feel and think, maybe offer my opinion on where this might have been found. And this is the other thing. I'm pretty generous when it comes to, not every earth cache owner is, but I'm pretty generous when it comes to people providing their answers. What I really want to know is, did you try? Did you get there? Did you make the observations? And you're trying. It doesn't have to be 100%. It's not going back to school. You're not going to get graded. Honestly, I don't think I've ever revoked a log on one of my earth caches. Nope, that's not true. I did it once when somebody FTF'd one of my earth caches and never sent me answers.
Oh.
That one I did pull their log.
Okay, that's fair.
Like,
yeah,
that's not right. But generally, as long as I see somebody sends me an answer and made an attempt, I sometimes I'll say, oh, hey, I see, maybe you didn't quite get this piece that I was trying to communicate. Here's what I think it is. And sometimes I've had a couple of mine where somebody's actually provided me information I didn't know already about the location, because I'm no geologist, so I don't know everything, but it's fun that way.
Now,
So
when you
give it a try.
get people sending you your answers, do you usually message them back and say all good, thank you,
try
or
to.
any? Okay, you do.
I try to. I usually will get back to people. I might not get back to them right away. As you know, I'm busy out exploring, filming, editing, podcasting, writing books, all this stuff. So I try and keep up with it. And Mrs. Monkey won't. Like, so she's like, nope, those are yours. You can respond to those. I'll respond to people about puzzles. You respond to them about the earth cache. Like, all right. But yeah, I will read through everybody's answers eventually, usually within a week of them getting the answers in. As long as I'm not, out in the mountains somewhere where I don't have any data. But I'll get back to people as soon as I can, and I'll let them know, like, hey, great answers, or go ahead. And they've logged already, right? People will submit their answers and then log it, and I'm fine with that.
That does bring up a good topic about etiquette for earth caches and virtuals both, because most of the earth caches and virtuals I've done, I've never gotten a response back.
Oh, wow.
From a CO. Like there's several I've done. Okay, granted, it's not that I've done that many of each, but I would say about 50% of the 2 types that I have done, I have never received any kind of response back from the CO. I will log the find and send my answers to the person and see if somebody sends back. But I actually saw somebody question on Facebook, are you supposed to wait until you get the okay from the CO or just log it?
In theory, you're supposed to wait until you get the okay, but it is incredibly rare that somebody will do that. And what you'll see is largely in the descriptions, people will say, send your answers, log your find. If there's a problem, I'll get back to you. And as EarthCache owners, in 95% of EarthCache owners I've interacted with, out of the 700 plus that I've done, people are fine with that. Of send the answers and then log your find. And as long as they're, the answers were sent, same with virtuals, as long as the answers were sent, most of them are like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, not everybody gets back to me. Most do, I find, in my own experience, but your mileage may vary, as they say.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I've seen several that say, like you said, log it, I'll let you know if there's an issue. But I've had a few times that it doesn't say that on the description. You just never hear anything back. It's like,
Right.
well, I guess I'm good. So
what else are you going to do, Amy?
Well, Jay, thank you so much for coming on here with me and talking Earth caches. It's been fun. It's been informative. I've learned quite a bit myself about these. Thank you so much for doing this with me tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me on the Geocache Adventures podcast. It's been my pleasure to be a guest here, and I'm always excited and happy to talk about earth caching.
You've been listening to Geocache Adventures with me, Shadow Dragon 1. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or go to geocacheadventures.org and you can find the information on the contact page. Theme music is by The Travel Bugs. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have you heard of FTF Magazine? It's the magazine for geocachers. It is full of articles and pictures, all submitted by geocachers just like you. I'm a subscriber myself, and I love it. My favorite part is the little snippets on the edges of the articles on all the different pages. Those are my favorites. Just go to ftfgeo.com to check them out and tell them Shadow Dragon 1 sent you.